During the chilly winter of 2020 in Fort Valley, Georgia, 23-year-old Anitra Gunn, a senior at Fort Valley State University, was eagerly preparing for graduation. Balancing her academic workload with a part-time job, the driven and warm-hearted student had been making strides in job interviews and enjoying life's milestones with close friends. But what began as a hopeful season ended in tragedy when Valentine's Day brought an eerie silence from Anitra, one that set off alarm bells among those who knew her best. That morning, Anitra's closest friend, Sierra Stewart, awoke to a string of odd messages from Anitra's phone. At first, the two exchanged their usual cheerful Valentine's greetings. But soon, Sierra noticed a shift. Anitra's texts became unlike her, hinting at plans to meet up with someone referred to only as Dude. The tone felt off. Anitra was known to be in a rocky, on-and-off relationship with 22-year-old U.S. Army Sergeant DeMarcus Little, and there had been no mention of anyone else recently. Sierra, who had always distrusted DeMarcus due to his turbulent history with Anitra, grew uneasy. Her concern deepened when another mutual friend, David Howard, known to many as Scoot, reached out. He too had received strange messages that morning. And DeMarcus? He claimed he hadn't seen Anitra and didn't know where she was. Feeling the weight of growing worry, Sierra contacted Anitra's father, Christopher Gunn, in Atlanta. Without hesitation, he headed to Fort Valley to search for his daughter. Before arriving, he requested a welfare check at Anitra's home on West Church Street. Police found the house empty. Her car, a 2013 white Chevy Cruze, was also gone. By then, all communication from Anitra's phone had stopped. The final texts were sent between 8:30 a.m. and 11 a.m. on February 14th, first to Scoot, then to Sierra. After that, silence. Once in Fort Valley, Christopher officially reported Anitra missing. Authorities quickly launched a full-scale search effort. A joint task force was created, bringing together Fort Valley Police, the Peach County Sheriff's Office, and the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, GBI. Their mission: to bring Anitra home and uncover what had happened. Investigators tracked Anitra's last verified location to a house on Chestnut Hill Road, where she had spent the night of February 13th with her boyfriend at his aunt's residence. That boyfriend, DeMarcus Little, became the last known person to see her, and the focus of public and media suspicion as the search intensified. The investigation that followed would be exhaustive. With a community desperate for answers and a father fighting for his daughter, law enforcement promised to leave no stone unturned in their pursuit of justice for Anitra Gunn.
This is the last place she was seen Thursday night about 11:30.
Okay.
The aunt confirmed she was here with her boyfriend. It's the last place she was seen. So what we're doing today is basically we're fixing to search this house to make sure there's nothing there that we need to see. And we're just going to start from here and work our way out. We got the GSP helicopter flying the woods, just looking for anything we can find. Right now, everybody that knew her is a person of interest until we're kind of whittling that list down.
Has the boyfriend been questioned?
Yes, ma'am.
He's not in custody, is he?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
On the night before her disappearance, Anitra Gunn had been enjoying herself at a small house party with a few close friends. The evening appeared to be an ordinary one, full of laughter, music, and good company. Around 11 p.m., Anitra left the gathering alongside her friend Tracy King, her on-again, off-again boyfriend DeMarcus Little, and his longtime friend Javen Abram. After leaving the party, the group headed to DeMarcus's place, where they spent the next few hours. Sometime after 2 a.m., Javon dropped Anitra and DeMarcus off at her home on West Church Street so she could pick up her car. From there, the couple split from their friends and made a late-night stop at Waffle House before returning to the home on Chestnut Hill Road to spend the night together. DeMarcus later told authorities that the next morning, Valentine's Day, he last saw Anitra around 11:30 a.m. He claimed she told him she had a job interview scheduled, and he assumed that was where she was heading. However, there was an inconsistency in the timeline. Anitra's interview had actually been set for 9:30 a.m. If she really left around 11:30 a.m., as DeMarcus stated, she would have already been more than 2 hours late. In the early stages of the investigation, 22-year-old DeMarcus Little was taken in for questioning outside the Chestnut Hill residence. Law enforcement also towed his 2019 black Toyota Corolla, identifiable by its distinctive red pinstripes, for forensic processing. DeMarcus, a Fort Valley native, had enlisted in the U.S. Army in 2016. At the time of Anitra's disappearance, he was stationed at Fort Eisenhower, formerly Fort Gordon, in Augusta, where he served as a unit supply specialist. His background, much like Anitra's, included early loss. He had lost his mother as a child and was raised by his father and stepmother. Described by those close to him as family-oriented, he was said to be close with his two sisters and generally came from a tight-knit household. Despite the outward image of a promising young soldier with shared life experiences, DeMarcus's connection to Anitra and the circumstances surrounding her final hours soon placed him under intense scrutiny.
Could you use one word to describe him?
Just caring and loving. Very.
With his military career on the rise, DeMarcus Little seemed like an ideal match on the surface. He appeared driven, disciplined, and dependable, a great catch by many standards. But as investigators began talking to those closest to Anitra Gunn, they uncovered a troubling reality. The relationship had been strained and unhealthy for several months. Friends described it as toxic, filled with emotional ups and downs. However, people in DeMarcus's life didn't share that view. To them, the relationship seemed normal, and they continued to see him in a positive light.
Because they said they
I don't know, but it's God got this. God is the judge and the jury.
When you're innocent, you stain.
You guys think he's innocent?
Yes, no doubt. We know
It's a fact, baby.
very close relationship with her. She was just like a niece to me.
Anitra's 2013 white Chevy Cruze was eventually found just a few blocks from her home, noticeably damaged. The front bumper was missing, and the tires were caked with mud and debris, suggesting it had been driven off-road. Interestingly, just the day before, Javon Abram had picked up his friend DeMarcus Little from a nearby area and noticed the car parked there. "Isn't that Anitra's car?" Javon asked. DeMarcus dismissed it, insisting it wasn't hers. Inside the vehicle, police located Anitra's wallet and her keys, but her phone was nowhere to be found. Forensic examination of the car turned up DeMarcus's fingerprints and palm prints, including on the trunk. While this wasn't shocking given their relationship, it still raised eyebrows. Likewise, DNA from Anitra was discovered in DeMarcus's own vehicle. Again, not unexpected, but certainly relevant. What stood out was a claim DeMarcus made a full day into the search. He suddenly remembered that Anitra had shared her phone's location with him the day before. According to him, the last ping was somewhere near West Church Street, specifically on South Camellia Boulevard. But when Officer Whitehead from the Fort Valley Police checked the data on DeMarcus's device, he found that wasn't accurate. The phone had actually last pinged a few minutes further south, on Carver Drive. Following up on that signal, officers searched the area and discovered Anitra's phone, tucked inside a drainage pipe at the end of the street. Meanwhile, the multi-agency task force pressed forward with their search, scouring Fort Valley from Chestnut Drive and beyond. Rain or shine, the teams pushed through. When weather-grounded helicopters, deputies moved in on foot, trudging through dense woods and thickets. It was during one of these ground searches that a Peach County Sheriff's deputy noticed a path veering off the main road. It looked freshly disturbed, as though a car had recently driven down into the trees. He stepped out of his vehicle and followed the trail on foot. A short way in, there were more signs. Branches bent, underbrush flattened, and tire marks veering off course. Then, beneath a loose covering of brush and limbs, the deputy made a grim discovery. The body of a young woman. Poorly hidden among the trees were also broken car parts, including a section of a bumper, one that appeared to match a 2013 white Chevy Cruze.
Today at 3:19, deputies and members of the task force were out riding because of the weather. We couldn't get the helicopter up, so they were just riding, looking. We had an idea of the bushes and sticks that were in the front of the grill of her car. So the deputies were kind of looking for those areas. The area he found her at, he saw something similar, a little roadway going down into the woods. Rode down into the car wouldn't go anymore because of the rain. About 150 yards off the roadway, he found the piece of the car, part of the car piece that we've been looking for. Found Miss Gunn laying very close to part of that front bumper.
Do you have any persons of interest?
I think it's pretty common sense who our person of interest is.
Can you say it
And
though
who
out
is
loud?
that?
It's the boyfriend. I mean, we've talked to him 3 times.
An autopsy would later reveal that Anitra Gunn had died by strangulation. There were also signs that she had sustained a blow to the head, and evidence suggested her body had been dragged to the spot where it was ultimately discovered. On Wednesday, February 19th, just days after Anitra's remains were found, DeMarcus Little was taken into custody. However, at that point, he was not charged with murder. Instead, the arrest stemmed from a separate incident involving property damage at Anitra's home that had occurred roughly 2 weeks prior to her death. Around 3 a.m. on February 5th, Anitra and her friend David Scoot Howard, who had been staying over, were jolted awake by the sound of glass shattering. Initially, they assumed one of the pets may have knocked something over and went back to sleep. The following morning, after Scoot left to walk home, Anitra stepped outside and made a disturbing discovery. Her car tires had been slashed, and 2 of her home's windows had been smashed with bricks. She contacted the police to report the vandalism, but said she had no idea who could be responsible. Unbeknownst to some, this wasn't the first time her tires had been slashed during the night. It was the second such incident in recent weeks, further adding to the unsettling series of events that preceded her disappearance.
Your son is a person of interest, also that this Anitra's death. What do you have to tell people?
Basically, we're here today for granted bond hearing for criminal damage to property. And I'm just glad that he was granted bond for that particular matter. And so he can get back to his career in the United States Army. But it just hurt me to see him come in shackles like that, like he's a criminal. My son's never done anything to anyone. He didn't do this incident. I can sympathize with the family, I truly do. I have daughters. I even have one in college, and something like that would happen to her, I would be devastated. But my son didn't do this. He was raised the right way. He's not violent, never been in a fight, never having a criminal background. He's a good kid, a good soldier, serving our country proudly.
Does it annoy you that he's a person of interest?
It mostly annoys me how certain media and social media and certain people in society have destroyed him and slandered his name. They don't really know the real DeMarcus Little. The real DeMarcus Little is a very humble young man. He made sergeant 3 years in the United States Army. He doesn't have anything on his background, any blemishes, nothing. Nobody can't say nothing bad about my son. He's been here on this earth 22 years, and can't no one say anything terrible about my son.
Eventually, DeMarcus Little confessed to authorities that he was responsible for slashing Anitra Gunn's tires and hurling bricks through her windows. He admitted to acting out of anger after learning that another man had stayed overnight at her home. Despite this admission, DeMarcus continued to deny any involvement in Anitra's death. Initially, the Army sergeant was granted a $10,000 bond and was set to be released with an ankle monitor. But before he could walk out of the Peach County Jail, the case took a dramatic turn. Just hours later, DeMarcus was officially charged with malice murder. He wouldn't be the only one facing charges. His close friend, Javen Abram, was also arrested, charged with 2 counts of providing false statements to investigators and 1 count of concealing a death. Javon had long been considered like a brother to DeMarcus, but by the time the trial began in March 2022 at the Peach County Courthouse, their bond had fractured. In a twist that caught many by surprise, it was Javen Abram, once a trusted friend, who would take the stand as the prosecution's key witness against DeMarcus Little.
Javon will tell you that DeMarcus Little then struck Anitra, hit her, and choked her. Choked her to death.
During the trial, defense attorney Benjamin Davis painted DeMarcus Little as a man of integrity, an honorable soldier, humble in character, and someone incapable of murder. But prosecutor Neil Halverson presented a much darker narrative. He described DeMarcus and Anitra's relationship as deeply troubled, marked by manipulation, possessiveness, and emotional control. What once seemed like an ideal romance had, over time, devolved into a toxic cycle, one Anitra struggled to break free from. Much of the courtroom proceedings focused on months of messages exchanged between the two. In them, Anitra repeatedly expressed frustration and exhaustion, calling DeMarcus evil and manipulative. She wrote about feeling trapped by his constant threats and emotional abuse, describing how every time she tried to cut him off, he found a way back in. His texts were often accusatory, obsessed with the idea that she was involved with other men. On November 1st, Anitra messaged him saying they should stop talking altogether. She told him that every conversation left her feeling manipulated. Not long after, DeMarcus threatened to end his life and blamed Anitra for pushing him there. She grew worried and tried to reach him, only to later receive a chilling message. His suicide attempt hadn't worked, but his manipulation had. Just days after that exchange, their communication resumed. On Anitra's birthday that November, even though they had broken up, DeMarcus messaged her, warning that he was sparing the man he believed she was seeing that night. He made threats toward any man he thought she might be involved with, and even sent a screenshot of a message he claimed to have sent, offering someone $200 to harm Anitra's supposed date. "We're going to have problems if you go out with him, on my mama," he warned. At other points, he threatened her life outright, telling her his mercy has limits. One of the people who took the stand was David Scoot Howard, a local barber who lived just a few doors down from Anitra's home on West Church Street. Scoot, who worked across the street from the 1836 restaurant and lounge where Anitra was a server, told jurors that on the morning of February 14th, he realized he may have left his second phone at her house the night before. Since he used the phone for work, he texted Anitra asking if she could check for it. The reply he got back was strange. The message from Anitra's phone told him to send his location and she'd drive over to him. Scoot found this deeply suspicious. Anitra knew exactly where he lived. In fact, from the end of his driveway, he could see her front door clearly. She had never needed directions, and certainly didn't need to drive.
When you're getting this message, what were you thinking?
This ain't her.
Okay.
Scoot tried calling Anitra, but she didn't pick up. Instead, he received a series of messages, the first saying that she simply couldn't talk at the moment. Then, to his confusion, another message seemed to suggest she was trying to break up with him. Scoot was baffled. He responded that it was fine, but he wasn't even sure they were involved in that way. He clarified that they had only spent time together a couple of times and, in fact, he wasn't sure he'd even classify them as friends yet. They were still just getting to know one another. When the person using Anitra's phone asked for his address again, Scoot firmly told them he wanted no part in whatever was going on. Something didn't feel right, and he was increasingly uncomfortable with the situation.
Does it look like she's trying to break up with you?
Yeah, it like we go together, but it wasn't like that.
Okay.
At this point, Scoot stood outside his house, growing more uneasy. The person texting from Anitra's phone instructed him to wait out front, saying they were on their way. As Scoot stood there, he noticed a 2019 black Toyota Corolla with red pinstripes driving around his block repeatedly, 5, maybe 6 times. Worried, he messaged Anitra's close friend, Sierra Stewart, explaining the strange texts he had received from Anitra's phone. He also sent her the license plate number of the black Corolla. Later, law enforcement would confirm that the vehicle belonged to DeMarcus Little. On the afternoon of Sunday, February 16th, DeMarcus and his friend Javon Abram left church together and went for a drive. During the ride, Javon testified that DeMarcus confessed to him, revealing that he had strangled Anitra. DeMarcus explained how he had poured his heart out to her, telling her that they were soulmates and expressing his love. According to DeMarcus, Anitra had laughed at him in response. In the moments that followed, he claimed to have blacked out. The next morning, he said, he had taken her body and disposed of it in the woods.
I was talking to her, I was talking to her, and she was like, trying to tell her how I feel about how, how much I love her and stuff. He was like, she ended up laughing in my face, He was like, Brian, I don't know what happened. I just blacked out. And I don't hit him. Then he was like, when he was like, after that, like, he just grabbed me and started choking me. Yeah. One time she just stopped fighting. So he felt like she had wanted to be home or she wanted to go where I want. So
he told you that he had poured his heart out to Anitra, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
And that Anitra had laughed at him, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And that he had hit her?
Yes, ma'am.
And that he started to choke her?
Yes, ma'am.
And that she fought at first, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And then he said to you that it looked like she just gave up because she wanted to be with her mother?
Yes, ma'am.
And that's her mother who's dead?
Yes, ma'am.
The next day, Javan realized that he had unknowingly helped cover up a murder. DeMarcus admitted to him that he had placed Anitra's body in the trunk of her own car before driving it toward Crawford County. The rough terrain caused the front bumper to fall off, but DeMarcus continued on, eventually driving back to Fort Valley. He parked the car a few blocks from Anitra's house, then called Javan, telling him that the Chevy Cruze with the missing bumper couldn't possibly belong to his ex-girlfriend. DeMarcus also revealed that he had kept Anitra's cell phone with him that morning, later discarding it in a drainage pipe. Javan recounted how they drove out to Greer Road near the Peach County-Crawford County line, where DeMarcus had abandoned Anitra's body. Upon seeing her, Javan went into shock and refused to get out of the vehicle. DeMarcus retrieved part of the bumper from the Chevy Cruze, which was lying nearby, and asked Javan to help him push it into the trunk. They then drove the bumper further out and discarded it in a ditch along another road. Eventually, that portion of the bumper was found in the exact area where Javan had described, supporting his version of events. Adding further weight to Javan's testimony was the cell phone data, which matched the movements of both his phone and DeMarcus's, confirming the timeline of events. The data, however, did not align with the story DeMarcus had told the jury. Assistant District Attorney Don Basson relentlessly questioned DeMarcus about the discrepancies between his testimony and the cell phone tracking. The data clearly showed DeMarcus traveling from his aunt's house on Chestnut Street to the location near where Anitra's body was found, off Greer Road on Valentine's Day. DeMarcus insisted, however, that his transaction history and location data during that time was accurate, though he claimed he had never been anywhere near where Anitra's body had been discovered.
So every single cache location that we just talked about accurately showed where you were.
Those my whereabouts where I went, where I drove. Yes, ma'am.
So those same cache locations show at 103, you driving on Tanglewood Road, headed toward Greer Road. Is that correct?
No, ma'am.
So your phone went offline at that point?
I know where I went.
And then those same cache locations, which were right from noon until 1 o'clock and from 2:20 for the rest of the day, they then show you in the woods off Greer Road, correct?
No, ma'am.
They don't show you there?
I wasn't in the woods.
No, that wasn't my question. My question was, do those cache locations, which you just testified were absolutely accurate with regards to your whereabouts between 12 and 1 and 2:20 to the rest of the night, those same cache locations show you in the woods off Greer Road, don't they?
Those were inaccurate.
Just those?
Yes.
And your phone shows you going from 420 Chestnut Hill Road to the woods off of Greer Road. Isn't that what happened, sir?
No.
And you got back in Anitra's car and you drove it over ditches and trees, causing the bumper to fall off, causing everything else to break apart, and you dumped your soulmate like garbage in the middle of the woods, didn't you, sir?
No, ma'am.
Just like your phone said you did. And then you drove back down her beaded car with a missing bumper and the missing wheel well, and you dumped her car just like you dumped her. At the corner of Bell and Montrose, didn't you, sir?
No, ma'am.
Just like your phone said you did.
No, ma'am.
So your phone is lying.
I ain't getting what's going on.
I don't think it's necessary.
DeMarcus's timeline became increasingly unclear when he tried to explain his whereabouts later in the morning on February 14th. Initially, he told the police that he had been at his home around 11:30 a.m., shortly after Anitra left his aunt's house on Chestnut. However, his messages to Sierra at that time contradicted this, as they indicated he was out searching for Anitra. Additionally, David "Scoot" Howard noticed DeMarcus's car driving around the block in Fort Valley around the same time, further muddling his account.
What were you doing driving in your car, circling the block around where David Howard lives between 11:30 and 12:15?
I told you I went to look for Anitra
Why? She left you 5 minutes before.
because I want to see this she go to Anitra.
So when Anitra left, you followed her?
I don't remember the exact time, but
It's so hard, isn't it? You just told the jury a few minutes ago that you were actually just hanging out at the house. That didn't answer my question, sir. My question to you was, what did you do between 11 a.m. and 12:15?
I can't remember that.
You can't remember what you were doing.
I know I was at the house.
Okay. So when you say, I'll be back, you actually did leave the house then, correct?
Just moved.
Okay. And you did get in your car, and you did drive repeatedly by David Howard's address.
I didn't know his exact address. I drove around the location.
And you were doing that with Anitra's phone, correct?
No, ma'am.
It's weird because Anitra was texting David Howard at the exact same time. You're driving around asking where he is and what he looks like. You know, weird. It's like a coincidence. That's what we use before. You ever heard the old saying, the simplest explanation is usually the truth?
No, ma'am.
The jury deliberated for roughly 3 hours, carefully weighing 3 charges: malice murder, felony murder, and aggravated assault. If the jury determined that DeMarcus had killed Anitra in a fit of rage, they could opt for the second charge, felony murder, which applies if the killing was done without premeditation. Both murder charges carried the potential for the same penalty.
Count 1, malice murder, read the jury find DeMarcus Devontae Little not guilty. For count 2, felony murder, read the jury find DeMarcus Devontae Little guilty. Count 3, aggravated assault, read the jury find DeMarcus Devontae Little guilty.
After the verdict, Assistant District Attorney Don Basson spoke publicly about the concerns the state had when selecting jurors for the trial. At the time, there was concern that some jurors might struggle to hold the abuser fully accountable for his actions. Despite his increasingly volatile behavior, Anitra had returned to him multiple times. Basson likened the situation to a frog in a pot of water that heats up gradually. Had Anitra been immediately subjected to severe abuse, she would have left. But over time, the manipulation was subtle, becoming an ongoing cycle. This gradual escalation eventually led to serious threats, which would have otherwise been enough to prompt her to escape and seek help.
The picture that we wanted to paint was that despite the frustrating nature of domestic violence, especially from those of us that are sitting on the outside, that is to never give up, to keep fighting, to remind the individual who's in the cycle that they're in a dangerous pot of water and that it's going to come to a boil.
The state argued that the only fitting sentence for the murder of Anitra Gunn was life in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge concurred, and in March 2022, DeMarcus Little was sentenced to spend the remainder of his natural life behind bars.